Whew. Hey guys, what's up? It's Vinegar Horror Reviews. I'm here with a Blu-ray DVD collection update. Most of this stuff is stuff I bought during Black Friday sales, and it took forever for it to arrive. And a small chunk of this is birthday presents from my siblings and friends. So let's just get into this shit. I guess I'll start with um, the Black Friday stuff because that's what most of this is. I'll get the one release that isn't a Black Friday purchase out of the way. I got the release of Wicked World from AGFA, the American Genre Film Archive. This is the directorial debut of Barry J. Gillis, who co-directed, well, co he wasn't credited as director, but he co-wrote and starred in Things, which is a really, really weird, ultra low budget, really bad shot on 8mm exploitation film from the late 80s. And this was his film that he did in 1990. I think it was shot in 89, maybe. Um, but this was never released. Really, it was, for as far as I know, this was never really um, released to the public. Like, the original cut, which was a very rough cut, was released. I think, like, for a very short time on, like, it had a really cheap budget DVD release or something like that. But this is a Blu-ray DVD combo featuring the original cut, which was the version that kind of got released in the 90s and everything, 90s and like early 2000s, and that's the one pretty much everybody had seen up until this release, which this release contains the director approved 2019 director's cut of the film, which is absolutely bananas and just as broken as Things is, and I really, really enjoyed this. I wrote a review for it on Letterboxd, which, yeah, if you have a Letterboxd account, find me on there. My username is BiscuitBoo666. I talk about movies that I don't on there that I don't talk about on here, at least not too often. But this is one that I reviewed on there, and this was really, really enjoyable and interesting kind of movie. On to the Black Friday stuff. Let me move this stuff over a bit. The Vinegar Syndrome Black Friday sale was absolutely killer this year. They had a couple surprise releases that were great. They had quite a few. They had a couple new slipcovers that I just had to grab. One of the slipcovers that I grabbed, which was for a release that I already had, is the one for Pigs, which is a movie that was originally released by Trauma Entertainment, and I have the Blu-ray. I've had the Blu-ray for like a year. But Pigs was a movie I saw in high school, and I really liked it. I thought it was a really interesting movie. And, I rewatched it. I want to say sometime last year, like late last year, I watched it, and I really enjoyed it, and I was like, yeah, that's definitely a lot better than I remember it being, and I remember really liking it. But, yeah, Pigs. It's the director's cut, new slipcover for it. I already own the Blu-ray, but now I have the slipcover. Okay, now onto some actual releases. We got the release of Tammy and the T-Rex, which, with the limited lenticular slipcover, which is, cool and everything. I kind of like the PG-13 slipcover cover art a bit more. I mean, it's not bloody and, everything, but there's a lot less going on. It's not as crazy. It doesn't look as busy. But this is a really, really interesting movie that Vinegar Syndrome put out. I had only heard of this movie in passing before Vinegar picked up the rights to it and released the uncut version. For those of you who don't know, this is like a weird 90s kind of splatter comedy that has to do with a teenager being murdered, and he has his brain transplanted into the body of a robotic dinosaur, and his girlfriend tries to save him. And yeah, it fucking goes places. When it was released, you know, for audiences, they saw it and they were like, yeah, this is cool and everything, but there's way too much profanity and gore, so they cut it down to a PG-13, cutting like 10 minutes of gore scenes that were done by the guy who did the effects in the Ghoulies movies, as well as I think Spookies and Mausoleum and Troll. But yeah, they had really great gore effects. And this movie also features the actor who was Isaac in Children of the Corn, which is, again, a really entertaining role. But I really like this movie. It's an absolutely bananas flick. It's wild, it's gory, and this also includes the PG-13 cut in standard definition, but I don't care about that, honestly. I got Hell Comes to Frogtown and the nice limited split cover. I'm happy that I managed to grab this because, you know, I've always been interested in seeing Hell Comes to Frogtown because it is a weird, like, bordering horror, bordering science fiction horror, but a weird post-apocalyptic film starring Roddy Piper, which I love Roddy Piper so goddamn much. And it's a weird sex comedy, action, exploitation film where Roddy Piper's like the last fertile male in the wasteland, and he has to go save a bunch of women from being sex slaves from frog people and impregnate them. It's an absolutely wild film, and it's something that you could definitely only see coming out of the 80s. But, you know, Vinegar Syndrome did a good job with this release. This is one of those movies I had been meaning to see forever, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to bite the bullet and grab it, and I do not regret it. This one I'm not going to dwell on too long. It's the release of The Candy Snatchers. This is one, knew nothing about it, grabbed it because it was the Black Friday kind of special surprise release, and it sounded interesting enough. And I actually reviewed this on my channel, and, you know, check out that review if you want some more information on this. But this is a really disturbing, interesting kind of mix of exploitation horror, kind of crime thrillers, exploitation, you know, horror films and kind of crime thrillers, combined with some darkly comedic aspects. It's a really interesting movie, though. It's actually pretty good. We got Spookies. Holy hell, this finally has a release on disc in the US. Like, Jesus Christ, have I been waiting for this to have a nice US release. And this one, I bought slipcover protectors. I just took them off of the ones that had them on so for this video for sake of convenience. But this is going on the shelf with my expensive limited releases. I have like my release of Flesh Pot on 42nd Street from Vinegar up there, but Spookies is a pretty legendary movie, mainly because they started shooting it, and then, like, I'm pretty sure they finished filming it, or they were almost finished, and then the producers fired the director and hired somebody else to make it, to finish it, and they shot all these new scenes for it and everything, and it's just this wild, like, monster movie where there are, like, a million different monsters in it. It's just a trip, and I dug it. This is one I bought on an impulse, mainly because I kind of liked the cover art and plot. It's Dominique with the slipcover. You know, I really liked the cover art. The plot sounded interesting, with it being about a rich guy and his wife ends up committing suicide. But did she commit suicide, really? It kind of reminds me of the French film from the 50s, Diabolique, which is actually one of my favorite movies of all time. This, however, is a pretty uninteresting and boring kind of attempt at combining Diabolique with, like, giallo film elements and colorful lighting. I do like some of the lighting in this movie, and there are some aspects of it I like. But very similar to another film Vinegar put out, which was The Hearse, where it was a film that I read the plot to, and I was like, this sounds really interesting. It's a film very similar to that, where I decided to watch it and it was not that interesting. I mean, I don't necessarily regret purchasing the Blu-ray. You know, it's an interesting piece to add to the collection, but I don't think I'll ever watch it again. Speaking of blind buys, this is one that actually turned out pretty good for me. It is Decoder. This is their release. This is Vinegar Syndrome's release of the 80s German kind of social satire science fiction horror film, Decoder, about a guy who works at a fast food restaurant, realizing that if he changes the music that they play through the speakers at the restaurant from calming, easy listening music to harsh noise music, he can incite riots, and he attempts to kind of incite a revolution against a totalitarian government. It's a very interesting, very weird movie. It's got some really cool music and definitely some really great, memorable scenes. It also features a cameo. Maybe cameo is the incorrect word, but it features beat author William S. Burroughs, who is one of my favorite writers. He wrote stuff like Cities of the Red Night, The Place of Dead Roads, Naked Lunch. You know, he's a very interesting, prolific writer, and very, very heavily politically involved in his writing. And he had a part in this movie, and yeah, that's kind of one of the big reasons I wanted to see it, and it was actually really, really cool. Is one that I bought, that I got because I remember watching this like after I got out of high school and thinking, you know, hey, that was kind of a cool, interesting movie. It's Pledge Night. This is a movie that was filmed in 1988 in the winter at a college. So it's technically, if you want to count it, an 80s slasher film. I definitely can see that aspect of it. But it's a 80s... the film was released in 1990. And it's a... Oh, wow. Hey, even on the back it actually says 1988. That's kind of cool that they put that on the back instead of 1990. Because most times when you look up stuff about this film, they say 1990, which was when it was released. But still, Pledge Night. This has never been on disc in the U.S. This has never been available on DVD in the U.S., and now it is on DVD and Blu-ray, and that is very nice. We got some reversible cover art, which is fine. I kind of like the cover art with the fucking hand in the toilet. It's you know, just kind of cool. And this slipcover is very nice. I really like it. This one is like a college slasher film, essentially about a hazing prank gone wrong, and this guy dies, and then, you know, 20, 30 years later, he comes back and haunts the new pledges of this fraternity, and it's an interesting kind of gory, you know, supernatural slasher film, kind of reminds me of like Nightmare on Elm Street, except not as good. This is the only one that I haven't watched yet. I've been meaning to put this one on and watch it, but I'm just lazy. It's Taking Tiger Mountain, which this one is kind of an out of character purchase for me. As much as I like weird offbeat cinema, you know, buying a weird kind of a dramatic like science fiction film from the 70s, early 80s, is not necessarily something I'd usually buy. But again, this is actually adapted partially from a short story written by William S. Burroughs. Again, Cities of the Red Night, Place of Dead Roads, Junkie, and let's not forget his masterwork, Naked Lunch. This is adapted from his short story Blade Runner, which is where the famous film actually got its name from. It didn't get its name from the original short story. It was based on Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? But still, Taking Tiger Mountain. Haven't watched this one yet. Kind of been meaning to, mainly because it's an adaptation of Burroughs, and Burroughs is interesting. I've heard interesting things about this one as kind of a low-budget art house flick. Another one of the slipcover releases that they did was actually for one that I've been meaning to upgrade to Blu-ray for a while. It's Christmas Evil, also known as You Better Watch Out. Kind of mad that they put Christmas Evil on the cover, on the slip cover, because the original title of the film is You Better Watch Out, and that's the title that the director prefers to be referred to as. You know, yet on every release that's ever been done of this film, it's always Christmas Evil. And I know that's because like that's the name people know it by because that's what it was released as back in the 80s. But come on, this movie is not a slasher film. Christmas Evil is a weird movie because it's not a film that I would say isn't a horror film. It's definitely got some psychological horror and slasher elements to it, but it's also this weird kind of psychological drama that's actually very wholesome and heartwarming for the most part. Essentially having to do with a guy who is obsessed with Christmas and he kind of wishes he was Santa Claus. And, you know, he spies on the kids in his neighborhood to make sure that they are, you know, behaving and everything. And it's kind of creepy, yes. But he just wants to be Santa Claus, you know. He kind of has a problem. And, you know, things just keep happening to this guy. And really, the movie doesn't, like, become... I mean, it has creepy undertones. But for the most part, it's a pretty heartwarming and wholesome film up until a few key scenes. Like, if it weren't for those few scenes, they could show this on fucking the ABC Family, or whatever it is now, their 25 Days of Christmas. They could show this film, because it is legitimately one of the most heartwarming and wholesome Christmas movies ever made, and it is titled Christmas Evil. The last one I bought on a Black Friday sale from Vinegar is Blood Harvest, which this is their release of the 80s slasher film directed by, what is the guy's name? Bill Rebane, who, ooh, this director, what can I say about him? He did Giant Spider Invasion, which was kind of fun. But this is the film he made after he, like, met Tiny Tim, the musician, as he was performing in the town he lived in. And he was like, hey, do you want to be in a movie? And then they made this. Blood Harvest was the result of him meeting Tiny Tim and saying, hey, let's make a movie. And yeah, it's an interesting film. Maybe not a good one, but a very interesting one. Definitely the director's probably best movie. Because what is the other one he did? Like, The Capture of Bigfoot is really fucking bad. And what is the other one? Croaked, the Frog Monster from Hell is also really bad. This guy did quite a few interesting movies, though. He also didn't he do, I think he did Psycho A Go-Go as well, or Monster A Go-Go, I believe. Either way, this was his slasher film he did in the 80s with Tiny Tim, and it's bizarre. Now, onto some of the Black Friday stuff I got from Severin Films. As anybody might know, if they bought from Severin during this sale, if you spent like over $35, they sent you a copy of the newly discovered, I think it is the Continental Cut, or the European release version. I think it's referred to as the European release version or the Continental Cut of Jack the Ripper, which I have their Blu-ray of Jack the Ripper. I still haven't watched it, but they were like, hey, if you spend $35, you'll get a free copy of it with your order, which is cool. So, it just comes in a little cardboard sleeve, which it's fine, I guess. But still, I still have not watched the 1959 Jack the Ripper film that they put out on Blu-ray. But this was one of the bonuses they included, which is very cool. Also, Severin and Intervision stickers, which will go somewhere. The big release for this year for Black Friday is the Blood on Satan's Claw, which is inarguably one of the greatest horror films of the 1970s, and probably one of the greatest British horror films ever made. Probably the greatest folk horror film ever made. Maybe rivaled only by The Wicker Man. Um, this is a super limited release. They only sold this for the sale, and that's it. And this is the first time this has been available in the U.S. on disc. It's never been released on DVD, and here we have it on Blu-ray for the first time in the U.S. with the soundtrack, which is very cool. Blood on Satan's Claw is a really interesting folk horror film from the early 70s from Britain, having to do with the children in this small town, essentially slowly, one by one, being converted into Satanists, and they start killing people. It's a pretty lurid and nasty little flick, despite its age and despite some cheesiness. I would say with repeat viewings, because I rewatched this on the Blu-ray. With repeat viewings, I feel like it becomes a little less shocking and surprising. But this film is still quite interesting and really good, and definitely holds up as being pretty nasty. And yeah, just a second here. Let me. I gotta do something real quick. All right, sorry about that. But yeah, Blood on Satan's Claw. Really, really fucking happy that this finally has a release. And I did not have to, buy the UK Blu-ray release of it, which is, region locked. Hopefully, Severin can get their hands on the other film released, the other famous folk horror film released by, I think it was Tigan, who was the production company behind this film. Witchfinder General, which is a really, really great one. Almost as good as the Blood on Satan's Claw. I kind of prefer this one. It's a little more sleazy and nasty, which is, what I want out of horror films a lot of the time. Alright, on to the next one. We got, oh man, this one. It's Gwendolyn, also known as The Perils of Gwendolyn in the Land of Yik Yak. And the Land of the Yik Yak. So, I bought this because it looked kind of interesting based on the, ad that Severin put out about it. I was like, well, if this turns out to be just kind of a boring, softcore kind of porno, I guess I learned my lesson. But if it doesn't turn out to be a boring, softcore porno, I might have something very fun on my hands. And this is one that I actually did write a review for on Letterboxd. Again, username on Letterboxd, BiscuitBoo666. I will put the link in the description for it. Gwendolyn, this fucking movie. What can I say about this movie? This movie is absolutely fucking wild. It is a weird French kind of softcore porno adventure action film that is like Indiana Jones meets Emmanuel with like a bit of maybe with a bit of the 80s Flash Gordon film thrown in. This movie contains some very wild, crazy set pieces, and it's just so much fun from beginning to end. I was completely into it, and just absolutely blown away by how entertaining it was. I randomly started watching it, when I got it, and I was like, maybe I'm not in the mood. Maybe I'm not up for, some softcore porn adventure film. But by the time I was like 10 minutes in, I was already hooked, and I was like, okay, let's see where this movie goes. When I got this one, I'm actually kind of disappointed in. It is the Blu-ray release Severin did of Werewolf in a Girl's Dormitory. Alright, so this one. This movie's pretty famous, mainly because it is one of those movies that's on every single 50, 20, 30 movie pack of just public domain titles. This is one that is on every single one of those sets. And I was kind of hoping with, Severin advertising that this is the original uncut version. I mean, hell, it says it right there. It's said in their ads that the film would be maybe something that holds up very well and might be might be an overlooked, kind of underrated, underappreciated classic. And don't get me wrong, this movie has some cool aspects to it, and I think the music is alright. But, do I think the $28 I spent on this Blu-ray was worth it? No. No. As interesting as the movie was as a whole, I still thought it was kind of boring, and just, I really wasn't into it, for the most part. It's kind of like a giallo film, but the killer is a werewolf, and that sounds like a great setup to just about any horror film. But goddamn, does this just not hold up at all, in my opinion. I'll give it credit, like, it tries to have a kind of, complicated plot, and it tries to get you into the universe and tries to get you into the story. I just couldn't get into it no matter how hard I tried, and, I'm not saying I tried the hardest I possibly could, but I was trying, goddammit. So, there's that. But, yeah, Werewolf in a Girl's Dormitory, I don't think I'd recommend it. Speaking of things that are hard to recommend, we got Severin's Blu-ray release, again, Black Friday, exclusive, limited to 3,000 release, of Revenge of the Living Dead Girls. This is a movie I have an interesting history with. So, long before I started my channel, I caught this film on Netflix streaming, and I'm pretty sure the version I saw was the uncut version. And I remember seeing it listed on there and thinking to myself, Revenge of the Living Dead Girls? It's an 80s film. This could be fun. This could be, a good, gory, tit-filled, just fun, good time. And I watched it, and I was, like, legitimately kind of confused by the film. And also legitimately very disturbed, specifically at the, the famous scene towards the end, where the three zombie girls pick up a prostitute. If you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. But that sequence in particular, seeing that when I was in middle school, kind of really fucked with me. And when I did my first video I ever did on disturbing cinema, when I started my channel, I put this movie on the list because of that scene. It really, really stuck with me. And, I think that kind of says something. Here I have this film on Blu-ray now, uncut and remastered, first time it's been available this way in the US. One of the most kind of infamously perverse, zombie movies ever made, and it's a weird French film to top it off. That comes with the soundtrack to the movie, which is cool, I guess. But still, this is a movie that's kind of haunted me ever since. Watching it again, rewatching it for the first time since seeing it in middle school, now that I'm in my 20s, it was an interesting watch. It definitely didn't, mess with me the same way, but it's definitely not a pleasant movie. It's very perverse and fucked up and weird and gross, and The ending, I completely forgot about the really like far-fetched and ridiculous ending to the film. Um, so upon seeing it, you know, again and not remembering it, it's kind of entertaining, but still, Revenge of the Living Dead Girls from Severin. Good good release of a movie that is really bad. Speaking of movies that are really bad, ooh, God, do we have a doozy here? We got Night Killer. Um, this is an infamous movie directed by Claudio Fragasso. Co-directed, like there were extra scenes shot by Bruno Mattei. Claudio Fragasso, he is probably most well known for directing Troll 2, but he also did quite a few other movies, and his other movies are a bit more interesting. Um, One of his most famous movies is Monster Dog, which is a 80s Italian like rock and roll horror comedy that stars Alice Cooper, and that's probably the only reason to watch that movie. Um, Jokes aside, I do quite like that movie. He also directed Zombie 4, which was kind of interesting, and he worked together with Bruno Mattei on he kind of directed some extra scenes for Zombie 3, as well as Shocking Dark. But this movie was shot in the late 80s. It was going to be called Night Killer. It was going to be a fairly violent, fairly not vi- fairly like a not violent, fairly restrained, kind of mature, slow burn, atmospheric, psychological horror film. And the producers didn't like that, so they hired Bruno Mattei, who um, directed most of Zombie 3, as well as uh, Hell of the Living Dead, Rats, A Night of Terror. Um, he directed a lot of garbage. Let's just put it that way. And they hired him to direct gore scenes to put into the film to make it something that they could sell. And they sold this in Italy as the third Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. But the killer wears like a shitty Freddy Krueger mask and has um, a clawed glove, as you can see right there. Uh, yeah, I don't know what to say about this movie. It is an absolute clusterfuck of just, you know, tonal shifts and reused gore shots, just like flipped so the audience might not notice that it's the same shot again. It's something. I'll leave it at that. Speaking of Fragrasso and Bruno Mattei, here we have one of their first. Yeah, this their first collaboration before they did Shocking Dark. Um, Although they did, they did work together a little bit on Zombie 3, but that was mainly because Lucio Fulci was sick and he couldn't finish directing the movie. So, but this was their first collaborative effort together on their own movie, and it is Robo War. This is weird. This one's wild. It's a lot like Shocking Dark in the sense that it's this broken, kind of weird Italian action horror film that is a ripoff of multiple different popular movies that were around that came out, in the 80s. With Shocking Dark, it was a combined ripoff of Terminator and Alien. Well, Terminator and Aliens. And with Robo War, this was a combination of Rambo, Predator, and RoboCop, with it basically being the plot of Predator, but replace the Predator with a android that is that was created using the corpse of a dead soldier. It's entertaining. It's fun. It's ridiculous. It's gory. It's wild. It's all over the place. Not as good as Shocking Dark, in my opinion. Shocking Dark was more consistently entertaining, and Night Killer was definitely more consistently entertaining. But Robo War, still well worth checking out. Happy to have that one. This is one I got to rewatch. I've been meaning to rewatch this one for a very long time. Hence why this is why I bought the Blu-ray, so I could rewatch the restored version. Because the version I'd seen previously was the version that is in the public domain, and everybody's seen it. But talking about Drive-In Massacre, I saw this when I was in high school and really hated it. It's like a weird 70s kind of proto slasher film. I think this came out 76, which this was after Black Christmas, before Halloween. And it was after Psycho and Blood Feast. Hell, it was after, The Wizard of Gore and the Gore Girls and Peeping Tom even. But, this one is one of the interesting kind of early slasher flicks. So Drive-In Massacre. I haven't seen this since high school. I remember watching it and being incredibly bored by it, and just, not really liking it, so I just kind of never wanted to see it again. Here I am now, buying the Blu-ray of a movie that I hated, because I want to see, if I like it more now that now that I'm somebody who watches and enjoys movies like Manos: The Hands of Fate. Yeah, this has to do with a guy killing people at a drive-in theater with a samurai sword. It's pretty weird from what I remember. On to some of the Christmas gifts from family and friends. These are from my uncle. He just kind of bought me random movies, but actually one of these is a movie I quite like. The first was Wolves. Never seen this one. I've heard of it. I've seen it around, but I know this is like directed by the guy who wrote, I think, one of the screenplays for Watchmen and one of the screenplays for the X-Men. And he also does voice acting. The director of this movie does voice acting in like video games and stuff, so that's kind of interesting. But never seen that one, don't really care. This one, however, is a movie that I've seen before, and I actually do kind of like this one. It's He Never Died, starring Henry Rollins. This is an interesting kind of movie about a guy who's an immortal, and I'm pretty sure he like starts to spend time with his estranged daughter after he finds out he has a daughter, and he's like just a dude in his 40s, and he's like going to play bingo with all these old people and shit, and you slowly find out stuff about him, and I remember this being a pretty interesting little flick. And the dude turns out to like be immortal, and I think he's also like a fallen angel or something like that. I remember this being entertaining though, and I remember liking this one when I saw it, so I can't be too mad about that one as a gift. Some stuff, a couple of things that my siblings got me. Got some releases from Vinegar Syndrome. We got Blood Beat, which is an interesting one from Vinegar. That is a slasher film shot in Wisconsin, directed by a French dude, about a cursed set of samurai armor that comes alive and kills people. This movie is pretty wild, and I really like it. So, why the fuck not, We got Mausoleum. This is one that, that's kind of one of those famous like video store cover art movies that you always see, like, it's iconic in its own way, despite it not being the most, well respected or widely seen movie. But Mausoleum, I remember seeing this movie and thinking it was all right, thinking it was pretty interesting. Um, I'll have to rewatch it. I know this was the Black Friday release for like Vinegar Syndrome for last year, and people were freaking out about it. I was just like, I don't care about Mausoleum. Now the Children, which was the other one that they released, that one I fucking bought. But Mausoleum, why not? It's it's an interesting movie. I'm not mad about it. Oh, we got Mountaintop Motel Massacre, which this is another one that was like on my watch list it's been on my watch list since forever. Been meaning to see it pretty much since high school. Just never really got around to it because I'm really lazy and bad at getting around to certain movies. But this release from Vinegar is a pretty good one from what I've been told. I also gotta give a shout out. Gotta give some props to Vinegar Syndrome for doing this. They included 2 different slips for this release, each with different cover art on each side. So you got that one, which that one's kind of cool. Whatever. Got the weird fucking baby doll one, which that one's definitely a bit better. You got the cover art that is probably the most well-known artwork for this film, and then you have the cover art for the slip cover that they did for it, which I kind of like that one the most. But still, gotta give major props to Vinegar Syndrome for being willing to give 2 different cover art slips for one release. Maybe this was an accident and they sent me 2 of them in it by accident. I don't know, but still, that's like pretty fucking cool. I'm not gonna be mad about that. I actually quite like that I have, more than just these 2 cover art options. Because sometimes when it comes to cover art, like reversible slip covers and stuff, or reversible, just kind of slips for reversible cover art and everything, sometimes you have like one side that's really good and one side that's not so good. Sometimes you have 2 sides that are really great, and sometimes you have 2 sides that just don't work either way. I can't really think of any off the top of my head that any releases, but I know there are a couple releases out there where I've looked at both the cover art, both sides of the reversible cover art, and thought to myself, these are both fucking awful. This gives you 4 options. That's still cool. This one is one of the Black Friday slip covers. It is Luther the Geek, which I've seen this one before actually, but I remember this movie being alright. I remember not being the biggest fan of it personally, but I remember thinking it was interesting. Upon rewatching it, I'm pretty sure I liked it more the second time around. This is one of the ones that they did in conjunction with Troma. This is one of their kind of, lesser known titles in their catalog. But still, it's cool that we got a nice, reflective, foil cover for this weird exploitation film. We also got this release that they did for Hellmaster. Never seen this movie before, but I do like that's the slipcover they did for it. Very similar to the slipcover they did for Body Melt. But Hellmaster. Never seen this before. It's a movie that's been on my list for a while, mainly because the cover art is just so weirdly bad looking that it's perplexed me for the longest time, and I've always been interested in seeing it. And this has both it has a standard definition version of the home media release version of it that has been around since forever, and it has I think this is a 4K restoration of the original cut of the film, which was titled Vim, which has never been released before until now, which is really cool. Either way, Hellmaster, not bad. I'll be right back again. Oh, alright, now we're in the home stretch. Let's look at some of the clothing I bought on sale, as well as one figure that I got from Target for like $5 because it was damaged. As for the figure, I bought one of the what's known as this new line NECA is doing, called Toonie Terrors, which is basically horror icons, kind of in the style of like Saturday morning cartoons, like if there were Scooby-Doo villains, for example. And here we got Leatherface, which this one, the packaging was damaged on it, and it might not be too visible, but there's some hot glue right there because the chainsaw blade had completely broken off. So I just hot glued it back on. I was like, oh, the packaging's damaged. It says it's $5. I'm like, shit, I could probably hot glue that chainsaw blade back on, and if it's more than just that that's broken, it's only $5. But still, not a bad little figure. Gonna go up on the shelf. Oh man, Pennywise just fucking fell over. That fuck. God damn it. Yeah, I bet this is what you guys wanted to tune in and see a man in his 20s playing with action figures. God damn it. Okay. Yeah, onto the t-shirts and stuff. First, I got this pin from Fright Rags. This is the Big Trouble in Little China Jack Burton tank top pin, which is very nice, very cool. Love that movie. This is like, all of this is Fright Rags except for, I think, like except for two t-shirts, which I bought other places. So let's just start with the one, I guess, in the middle, which isn't a Fright Rags shirt. We got one of these famous ones that you see around quite a bit. I forget what the artist's name is who does these. Stephen Rhodes, that's the artist who does these designs. But I got the Let's Summon Demons t-shirt, the Ringer tee. I usually don't wear shirts that aren't black, but, you know, it's a nice white Ringer tee. Definitely wear that one out. Scratch my eyeball. This was on top of them having the Black Friday sale, Fright Rags also had a few shirts in clearance that I wanted. This first one is The Horror Show, 1989. This was a movie that was done in the late 80s, and it was just kind of a dark, like, supernatural slasher film. I have it on Blu-ray. It's a movie I like quite a bit, but outside of the US, it was advertised as the third movie in the House series. So, as a result, when they made the third House movie, they had to call it House 4. But yeah, The Horror Show. I like this movie. I like that shirt. We got this Ash vs. Evil Dead t-shirt, which I really like now that I've actually finished the second season. It saddens me that the show only got 2 seasons, because the way the second season ends, there's so much shit there that you could do so much cool stuff with. But, you know, I guess it's a fitting ending nonetheless. Either way, you got Old Man Ash with the Delta and the portal. It's just classic. It's classic shit. Like, you can't sit here and tell me that that's not classic. Next, we got one of the Fright Rags Blair Witch Project designs, which this was my favorite one out of the bunch that they released. The other ones were alright looking, but this one is basically the Blair Witch Project, but as a pulp novel, which, you know, it says adapted from the real found footage. But yeah, the Blair Witch Project pulp novel t-shirt, really like that one. Here's another one. I think after This one. Yeah, okay. I had to get these in the right order. This one, another one that is not black, but I will wear nonetheless, is their Return of the Living Dead Tarman Attacks t-shirt, which is obviously a play on the classic Mars Attacks collectible trading cards, which have been around since forever, but it's with Tarman from Return of the Living Dead. Next, we got this one, which this is a design based on Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, which is a very great kind of slasher comedy in the style of mockumentary films. It is just a t-shirt of Leslie Vernon himself, which is very cool. Oh my god, all my fingers are fucking falling over tonight. Alright, fucking Bachardy's gotta lay down with Pennywise. I'm sure that's a really bad fan fiction waiting to happen. And the last one, this one I actually didn't buy. This was a gift from my cousin. Yeah, it is Cthulhu. I like cosmic horror. But yeah, that is it for this video. This has been a fucking doozy to record. Either way, guys, it's Biscuit Boo Horror Reviews signing off. Peace.